Welcome to another episode of Under the Strap. I'm your host, John Rathouz, and this week I welcome Mark Immelman, the brother of President's Cup captain Trevor, and one of the best broadcasters in the business. Mark shares some valuable insight into how his brother is approaching the week, and you might be surprised to hear the football coach he's got in his ear. What was it like growing up in South Africa, 9 years older than his brother, and as the son of the former commissioner of the South African Tour? An interesting perspective on the current state of professional golf. Then we break down the President's Cup from a strategy and player perspective. My favorite part about why the international team might not stick perfectly to country lines when pairing up. Also, a routing change at Quail Hollow that could create more drama. And we wrap up with some fun stuff, including the best shots he's seen Trevor hit and a few Caddie shoutouts. It's going to be a big week for the Immelmans with Mark on the call, so enjoy this primer, Under the Strap. Welcome to another edition of Under the Strap, joined today by Mark Immelman. Super excited to be talking to him. He's host of On the Mark, golf broadcaster, golf coach. I saw NCAA D2 Coach of the Year in 2009, I think. Author, fellow girl dad. Hey, thanks for jumping on today.
My pleasure, John. Good to be with you. You're dating me with a 2009 quip there, so I'll forgive you right at the start. But yeah, no, it's you speak of what I do, what you guys do. I feel like, caddies are arguably the most important guys on the PGA Tour aside from the players. So it's good to be with you, man.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, no, I definitely want to get your takes on some caddies. And, the one thing I left out there, obviously also brother of the International President's Cup team captain. I swear I'm not a spy for the U.S., but I'm definitely interested to hear some of your takes on what's going on this week.
Yeah, sure. I mean, look, it's exciting. I'm looking forward to next week. I'm actually going to be on the call for the World Feed. But I'm jacked for Trevor. I'm the older brother, for those folks who don't know, older by 9 years, wiser, not as handsome, not as successful. But it's thrilling to see him in this role and to see how this team's come together despite all of the shenanigans on the go. So I'm looking forward to next week.
Yeah, it's going to be fun. And I'll be honest with you, I'm American, but I really am pulling for the internationals this time around. I know they're going to be heavy underdogs, but I love, I caught up with your brother at the Wyndham briefly, and he's just got such a good approach, I feel like, and I love the way the team came together, like you said, despite the shenanigans.
Yeah.
Maybe you've talked to him. I don't know how often you guys speak. I would assume pretty regularly. Can you give us just a little bit of an idea of where his head is at heading into this thing?
Trevor's always been a very pragmatic, very organized sort of a guy. I mean, ever since he was a kid, and ever since he was, honestly awarded this role because it's a thrill. He's been about, okay, I'm going to continue what Ernie began, a few seasons ago with the big run they made down in Royal Melbourne. And so Trevor's been cognizant of that, respectful of that. He's been very much carrying on in Ernie's footsteps, interaction with the players. And so he's having get-togethers, or he had get-togethers throughout the last 2 years.
Yeah.
With his understanding of the game nowadays and the fact that these guys are global, and with the world ranking points being the way the teams were selected, he also got together with these assistant coaches in the tour, the PGA Tour, and they changed some of the qualifying criteria to bring strokes gained in as a portion of the metric for selection. So he's been very thoughtful. He's typically Trevor in assuming this role, and he might be young. He's just I'm 40. Oh shucks, I'm getting confused now. 42, 3 years young. But he's got an old head on young shoulders, and he's very wise in what he does. So everything he's done has been measured. He sort of kept some stuff close to the vest. We talk a little bit, and he'll give me just a little bit to sort of tease me, and suffice to say that I'm not just, this is not his older brother talking. I wouldn't be at all surprised if, even with this weekend, and I use that term loosely because I would think that there's actually some really good combinations that they have now with the players he's picked. With this weekend squad, I feel like he's going to have them up for the battle come Thursday next week.
I really think they are too, and I want to break that down because I was super impressed with who the assistant captains are, and then if you look who else is on the team, there's some nice combinations of 2 and 4 guys that make a lot of sense. Like they've covered their bases, and if you contrast it with the U.S. team, I mean, they're just so strong on paper, and they're very battle tested. They have some rookies as well, and some great assistant captains. It feels not quite as dialed on the U.S. side for some reason. I think there's just been distractions left and right. So we'll see if that plays out at all. Go ahead.
No, I was about to say your point's well founded, and I would say if there's, and this is where Nick Saban is a legend, and Trevor, amongst some of the people he's called in for counsel, is Dabo Swinney. He and Coach Swinney from Clemson are big buddies. And Dabo is a master at motivation, getting guys up for the battle, even though you're the favorites. And the enemy of being the favorite is complacency to a certain extent. And you talk about the U.S. team, and as you look at them, they just seem like it's murderer's row, and they're unbeatable. And they've found combinations here of late with like Xander and Patrick Cantlay and stuff that are just natural fits, which wasn't always the case with the U.S. team. They was bouncing around the place and trying to just go with strength. But now they're matching up styles of play better to me. But that being said, it's 18 holes, and they know they're the favorites. So they've got to get up for this thing. I'm confident they will. When you get there and there's thousands. I mean, I spoke with someone the other day, Ron Green from Charlotte, and he said ticket sales are at 40,000 people a day, and they oversold. So it's going to be cranking out there at Quail Hollow, and I'm sure the Americans will be up for it. But that's what the internationals can go by is like, it's 18 holes. It's me on you. I know on one round I can beat you. I've proven it to myself, and if I was Trevor, I'd be preaching that. So it remains to be seen. Look, I think the thing, you caddy. There's that chaser's freedom, if you will, where there's no expectation really on the chaser. All the leader has all of the pressure on him because he's got to finish the thing. Yeah. I think the internationals can play on that a little bit too.
And how cool would that be? I mean, Adam Scott's going to be a big leader for him, but how cool do you think that would be for that group of guys to say, hey, we finally did it? Like it's been so lopsided. You referenced Ernie kind of making it, those guys on that team making it super competitive, and it's going to happen at some point. Like how cool would that be to be, you have nothing to lose, but also everything to gain, and you focus on like, hey, we're going to be that squad that finally knocks them down.
Yeah, you can be the watershed, and there will be in hindsight a lot of pride on that, and I'm sure this will be preached again. But the key for this crowd is just to keep their noses to the grindstone, and even though they may get down early, to realize that hold on, this thing's not over. I mean, personally, a few years ago, I was the captain and coach really for the international squad in the Palmer Cup. Okay. We were wildly outmanned by the U.S. team, and after the first session we were down, and I remember calling them around us without my assistance, and I looked at them, I'm like, let me tell you what I see out of all of this right now. I see a squad of really talented individuals who happen to be down after the first session. I don't see anything else. I'm like, from now on, you just go out there and you try and clip your match. Because it's, even though we're a few points down on the leaderboard, each session is new. And something happened in these kids, and they just came out and won every session from there on. And the more they won, the more the energy got up. And in the end, you could almost sense that they'd turned the tide against the American squad playing in Arkansas, which was fiercely patriotic. And next thing, they were rampant en route to victory. So it's all just remembering it's a match. Doesn't matter what the leaderboard's doing right now. I've got to just take care of my point. And Ian Poulter, funny enough, has mentioned that to me. He said that was always his sort of key in all these match play games he won.
Interesting. That's cool perspective. So you've been in your brother's shoes, in the Palmer Cup. Is there anybody? What a great honor! Is there anybody noteworthy players that played in that on your side or on the U.S. side that are current now?
I'm trying to think off the top of my head. Kevin Yu has just made it onto the PGA Tour. He played on my squad. Alex Del Rey, he stands out. He's playing over on the European Tour right now. Here recently, they also slipped my mind. I'd have to get the team sheet in front of me. But those are the two that stand out. Okay. But you look at who was on the American team, yep. and these were like the glitterati, if you will. And my crowd just got up and got together and managed to do the trick.
Yeah, beauty of match play. And you referenced earlier, Charlotte. It's going to be a great atmosphere. I mean, it's such a good golf town. You're going to be on the call. I saw you have done 3 of these before for the radio, I believe. What are you most looking forward to that week? Just when you put the headset on and you're kind of part of the whole atmosphere.
I'm on the world feed for this, so what you don't see in the United States, our feed will be going to whichever other global network is covering it. So from that point of view, I'm just keen personally to sort of bring a little bit of international to the international show. We've got a great crew. I've got John Swantek, who's hosting, who's like the voice of the PGA Tour, and Craig Perks is alongside him. Perks, he's from New Zealand, Players Champion from '02. Colin Swatton is on the ground for me, and Colin, he's caddied for Jason Day did for the longest time, and so we've got some international voices there alongside the Americans. So I look forward to our show bringing that sort of a flair, not being biased, calling balls and strikes as they are. So I'm looking forward to it from that point of view, and then I'm just looking forward to another President's Cup in the U.S. because the last one I did was at Liberty National, and it was one-sided, man. It started with the internationals being trounced in the Junior President's Cup, and my brother was the captain of that team. And then later that week, I mean, the internationals got a steady dose of JT and Finau and Phil, and they're just the Americans unloaded, so it was one-sided. So I'm hoping for this time to be a little bit more even, especially in the U.S.
Yeah, looking at the Statue of Liberty all day long, which is pretty good inspiration, I guess you'd say. You mentioned the internationals. Obviously, you're from South Africa. I've always had a fascination with South Africa. And aside, Paul Simon Graceland was like my family's jam growing up when we would go on road trips, and so I have an affinity for South Africa through that lens.
Yeah, I mean, all those songs he went over there and created with, I believe the band was Ladysmith Black Mambaza.
Yeah.
And there was this cool sort of folky Paul Simon sound mixed with his African sort of groove and beat and vibe. And so even for South Africans, that was, sort of tickles your soul a little bit. So I feel you, man.
Yeah. So I'm curious about growing up in South Africa, maybe just growing up in a golf family. You and Trevor, I guess you mentioned the age difference there. So that's a little bit interesting that like kind of when you were in high school, he was still finishing elementary school and stuff. But what do you remember about growing up in a golf family and playing golf with your brother?
Well, I remember, well, I guess it was at Trevor's advantage because I'm 9 years older than him. So when I got into golf at like age 13 and 14, me and my buds would go and play golf, and it was natural babysitting for my parents over the vacation. So they'd send Trevor along, and he'd be like 4 and 5. And we wouldn't wait for him. If he wanted to be there, he had to keep up. So there's this little kid with a bag on his back going along there and hitting the ball and keeping up. And he learned quickly enough that the only way he could compete was not in power, but he had to score. And so he got really good around the greens. And then I remember a young Trevor, whipping up on, some of the club members on the putting green for money, for Cokes and stuff like that. So, and snacks at the snack bar. And then I went away to college and I came back and he was 13 and just, he was honestly a world beater. He'd won the World Juniors at some stage. And I looked at this and I was an All-America and somewhat successful, and I couldn't beat my younger brother. So growing up, I just remember, a couple kids at a golf course, a place that really supported junior golf, allowed us to play. It cost us like a couple dollars to play all day long. And we'd play nonstop, and the practice facility was not like you have here in the States. It was like an area alongside a hole, and you had to have your own shag bag of balls and hit them and go and pick them up and come back. Yeah. So you learn very quickly to be accurate. And, then there's the typical kid stuff, going to find golf balls to use and stuff like that. So we grew up just like anyone else. And we were fortunate to be able to honestly advance to where we have.
I had Billy Foster on earlier this year, actually the week before they won the U.S. Open, and he relayed this story to me when he was caddying for, I don't know, maybe Seve or something, and he was over in Africa, South Africa, I believe, and he was getting yardages, but it was like before they had lasers, obviously, and he was using a string, and he's relayed this thing like where he went through this like marshlandy kind of sketchy area, got his number, and then found out the day after that it was like there was like deadly snakes in there, and he was just like, I can't believe I did that.
That sounds about right. I mean, I remember when I was a kid, you still have them if you go to a Lowe's or a Home Depot or something, and they're those construction wheels that measure
Yeah.
off a yard or a meter. And I remember pushing that thing around golf courses before I played to get yardages, because our courses didn't have yardage plates and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd lived in the States for a year, so I figured out yardages were important. And you'd make your own yardage book, and you'd figure out ways, huh? And I can expect, I can certainly expect that he went through some precarious spots doing that, because
Right.
it's Africa. I don't care where you are there. It's, there's some stuff there that can hurt you.
Yeah. Can you give me a quick pronunciation check? I'll put you on the spot here. I know you know it. You're going to be on the call next week. I've been struggling with this one.
Yeah.
The only South African player on the team next week is Christian fill in the blank. Give me the right way to pronounce his last name.
Bezuidenhout.
Bezuidenhout.
There we go. Very good. Yeah, it's all of the Afrikaans names there. South Africa is this melting pot of the country was discovered by the Portuguese, then settled by the Dutch, then the British came along, and then when they ventured up the East Coast, sugarcane farming became a thing. And Durban is a big city, so there's a huge Indian and Malay influence there. So we've got all of these people, and Dutch and English were the two major languages, and then you mix those with all the African languages there. What we speak, English and Afrikaans, and all these native South African languages, sort of our culmination of them all. And Bezuidenhout, hout in Afrikaans means wood. Suit means south. So they sort of fit these things together, and that's how the names happened. My last name, we're very Germanic, because there was some of that influence over there. So yeah, you'll get some words. There's a lot of French influence too with all the wine. So we'll have, it's de Trois, but we've got lots of de Tours and those sorts of people as well.
Well, thank you for clearing that up. You grew up, I guess I would kind of be curious about how old you were when this was happening, but your father was the commissioner of the Sunshine Tour, which, in the world of golf, I mean, the Sunshine Tour is a hugely important, proving grounds. And at certain times a year, it's kind of where everyone goes and plays, and always fascinated by that. Tell me a little bit about, his involvement being the commissioner, how old you were when, and if you have any memories from kind of being around pro golf at that time.
Well, the truth of it is, he assumed that role when I was growing up, and when my brother was growing up. My father was just a businessman, and sort of ascended up to the position of one of the marketing directors in a liquor company. And then when I moved over to the States and Europe, and Trevor was just fresh on tour. I mean, he was still, I believe, playing some in Europe. My dad was then offered the job as the commissioner of the Sunshine Tour. So it was well after I'd sort of finished playing the game. Trevor was still competitive. My dad was in charge there for, I believe it was 6 or 7 seasons. And he brought a real international flair to the place, and some new events. He was, I don't want to say the originator, but he brought over a number of co-sanctioned events with the European Tour. So suddenly sort of introduced the Euros had always been coming to Africa to play over the summertime, because of the alternate hemispheres, and winter here is summer there. And so he made these events like the Joburg Open and stuff, where it was bigger fields, co-sanctioned. So the Europeans would come down there, so there'd be world ranking points. And the South Africans got to play for Euros, which is a big deal, because it's worth so much more than our South African rand. So he was sort of one of the catalysts for that movement. And now that tour they travel all over Africa. They've got a lot of co-sanctioned and tri-sanctioned events. And going strong and producing a lot of good young players.
Absolutely.
I must admit.
Yeah. So I think this is a great segue then, with that connection. Never hear the word commissioner has not been used more than in the last year or two. Co-sanction, world ranking. I mean, the world of golf has kind of been turned upside down. Maybe just through that lens, you can kind of give me some thoughts. I mean, Monahan, Pelly, and then you've got Greg Norman, obviously. Like, so what's going on behind the scenes right now with these guys? There's a ton of ego at play. There's high stakes, a lot of money. I guess on that, and then your general thoughts on kind of what's going on right now.
I think as it pertains to Jay Monahan, I can't speak to Keith Pelly because I don't know him, and I work for CBS and for the PGA Tour, and
Yeah.
I've been in some meetings with our commissioner, and I want to backtrack a bit to best tell the story, because you know what it's like. The news cycle is like, what's happened in the last 12 hours, and what have you done for me lately?
Right.
And I think Commissioner Monahan has unfairly taken a whole bunch of criticism.
Mm-hmm.
Because back in 2020, when we were in the throes of the COVID lockdown and no one was going out, he guided the PGA Tour back as the first major sports league to competition. And we were out there, and it was a big job because he was taking a whole heap of criticism. The first event we were at the Colonial, and the CBS, our only on-course people was Dottie Pepper, myself, and Jim Nance were there, and the rest of the guys were in the Golf Channel studios, and we had limited people, and there were no fans, and all this testing for COVID and stuff, and we skated by the first event with no positives. And the next one we went to Hilton Head, right?
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, JJ Spawn goes down, GMAC goes down, and there's a bunch of guys, and all of a sudden the media are calling for Monahan's head, and they're like, "You got to shut down." And I remember seeing him on the course because it was the middle of the low country summer. It was freaking scorching. Sorry, my dog's in the background here. Scorching and humid. And I'm out there just looking at the golf course prior to the event, and he's there, no jacket, shirt sleeves rolled up, hot and sweaty, just, talking to players, saying, "We got you, we're looking after you," all this sort of thing. And I looked at him, I'm like, "You're doing a great job, Commissioner." And he goes, I'll never forget. He goes, "You think so?" And I'm like, "Yes, and you're the man for this job." And I could see a guy who was tired and working hard. And in the end, they came through with flying colors, right? Because then all the other leagues started opening up. So bearing in mind, that's this guy who's leading the tour through this challenge now. And he's facing a guy in Greg Norman who just wants to win. And he's got an axe to grind a bit, I believe, because of the first foray with Commissioner Fincham, which didn't work out. And when we have as announcers talked with the commissioner, he's just said, "Look, our duty is to our players. We're a membership organization. Our duty is to our sponsors and our charities. And we have to be resolute in what we do, because if we start just, opening the doors too much, then all of a sudden we dilute our product, which means television suffers, sponsors suffer, fans, all the rest of it." And so they took their stance. And are they confident in their position from what I understand? So far, it's proving worthwhile. Now, look, you're never going to keep everybody because, money talks. You know what that's like on the tour. So I can't critique him. He's faced two massive curveballs in just a very short tenure there. And I feel like dealing with them okay. Now, were there things that could change? Sure. And they are. And they're changing on the fly fast. And that's not in response because they had all this stuff planned. I feel like this whole thing just kind of accelerated everything.
Yeah.
But I'm keen to see how the next little while goes, because I don't want to say the other league is saturated, but with a small number of players, you can't grow very much more. Yeah. So I think all this, the PGA Tour folks are realizing to say, hold on, we're playing for a lot of money too. They're not the guarantees, and everything's getting better, and the tournament's all guaranteed, and the tour has a number of events that have still going to sponsor for the next conceivable amount of years. So the state of it is healthy despite everything that you're hearing, I believe.
Sure. No, I think those are great points. And I was around when he let us back in, and that it was run fantastically. I mean, there were some inconveniences there and stuff, and it was scary at times, but it really worked out well. And so that's great to note his leadership. And then now this other curveball, and you're just kind of operating on the fly. And I think it's going to be, the tour will be stronger for it in the long run. It's already a great, tour, great product. There's always reasons to kind of upgrade, make changes. And this is, they were in the works, but this is also kind of accelerating that. And so I have a lot of confidence in the tour going forward.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing. I think a lot of folks too critiques or folks, the Twitterati, I'd like to call them, where they're quickly onto the next thing that they can critique the tour on. But it's a major, major organization.
Yeah.
And any business, you don't see them just suddenly about facing when stuff changes.
Mm-hmm.
It takes a while for everything to move. And yeah, they're things that we can all nitpick and argue about. But they're up to the challenge, and Commissioner Monahan and his lieutenants they're a sharp bunch of business people. They know what they're doing. So I'm confident in the future.
Well, I want to talk a little bit about your teaching, coaching background. What's your general approach to teaching and coaching? How would you kind of summarize?
I very much bring a playing bias to my instruction. When I was a young golf instructor, I cringe at some of the lessons I look back on, where I was part of the Sony Handycam brigade, where you'd video a guy and I'd have some footage of Ernie and some of the golfers I'd been around, and you just compare and contrast kind of thing. And then I thankfully wised up and I got to spend some time with John Jacobs, God rest his soul, who was a legend of golf instruction. He was like a human launch monitor. And he taught me about cause and effect and playing the game and situational analysis. So whoever I'm working with, there's always a bent towards equipping them to be able to deal with the inevitable, whatever it's going to happen when the pressure is up and you're on the golf course. And then as far as instruction goes, I'm just awfully holistic. I'm 51 years young now, but the more I realize that, we're human beings who play golf. We're not golfers who are human beings. And so they're things that affect how we perform and stuff. So I look at the golf swing or the putting stroke or whatever, as a part of the individual. And I'm always looking at, where they emotionally, mentally, spiritually, even physically, and try and get those things to all work in harmony, because that's when, as you know,
Right.
the players perform their best. And so, I'm a swing an analyst, I would call myself, who focuses on playing the game better,
Right.
and I'll leave no stone unturned. I feel like the last thing I should be changing as a golfer is golf swing, unless
Right.
there's something glaring technically that just cannot stand up.
Yeah, maximizing what they have.
Exactly.
You referenced your experience too that I wasn't even aware of with the Palmer Cup, and you coach professionals. I get how would you next week, say you're a coach at the President's Cup, how are you getting your players ready for a big moment? Every week's a big moment, but this is a high pressure deal. How are you going to approach getting your player ready?
Well, if you're talking from an international standpoint, the first thing I would focus on is to say, look, you need to be prepared for the fact that you're going to hit a good shot and probably get a smattering of applause. And you're going to, and likely have some of the fans sort of cheering and stuff. And when you make a putt, you'll get the same thing. And when the Americans make a putt, the place will go bananas, because that's going to work you in your soul a little bit. So I'll start focusing on that sort of stuff. I will focus very much on combinations, because to me it's a team's tournament. There's one round of singles, and the rest of it is finding correct combinations. And guys whose games match up with each other and personalities match up and stuff. And then I just say to them, I'm like, it's a mindset change, this thing, because you guys play 72 holes of golf. That's a marathon. These things are sprints. And when you're playing alternate shot, if you shoot 3 or 4 under par, you're likely to win your match every time.
Yeah.
And if you're playing best ball, you're going to have to shoot 10 under or better to win your match. And so get busy. Go ahead and play a little offense, because as the internationals, you're kind of expected to lose, to be honest. So we'll go ahead and let it fly and just see where the chips fall.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about the teams a little bit. Start with the internationals. They've got a nice bit of balance and some firepower. There's a lot of guys that we aren't aware of. The general public is. I guess, how do you see the pairings maybe playing out? Do you think he's going to stay with the countries, or is he going to kind of try to match, a style of game?
Well, Trevor, he's talked from the very word go about finding games and not necessarily pairing countrymen because the truth of it is, golf is the international language. And I'll never forget Adam Scott, who Trevor will lean on highly because he's played, this will be his 10th, I think, President's Cup. It's insane. And Adam was paired alongside a young Hideki Matsuyama when I was doing the President's Cup at Muirfield Village back in the day.
Okay.
And Hideki was a newbie on the team. He was a rookie. And so I said to Adam, I'm like, how's it playing with Hideki? Because Hideki's English then was nowhere close to what it is now. And Adam goes, I just say good shot a lot because he knows what good shot means. And there's thumbs up and hand clapping. And I share that anecdote to say that, golf is kind of the international language. And you don't have to give some guy some big motivational speech in his language for him to get up for it. If you don't get up for it with the flag on your chest or the shield on your chest, then you don't really belong there. So Trevor's not afraid of breaking up country people. But that being said, I feel like the Tom Kim Sung Jae Im combination is a match made in heaven.
Right.
And to a certain extent, maybe Corey Connors and Taylor Pendrith in best ball. Because they work with the same instructor, they come from the same setup there in Golf Canada. So there's a whole lot of similarities and a comfortability there. But then Taylor, for argument's sake, and Corey, an alternate shot, I don't think would be the best bet because Corey plays out of the middle of the fairway every single time. And Taylor kind of lets the thing fly. But so I feel like that's where Trevor may vary around the place. You see, the alternate shot's the important one where you've got to have guys that play similar games. But best ball, you could put any two together and say, yo, just go and make birdies and have someone who can sort of be the anchor man and then someone who's the firecracker. And you look at that list there, and Pendrith is certainly a guy that can do that. Sebastian Munoz is one that can do that. Si Woo, you know what he's like. And Mito, they're those sorts of guys that can get busy a little bit. So I have a sense, I don't know for sure what the groupings might be, but I feel like there'll be some interesting ones that are put together on the international side.
Well, that's a great point. I love hearing that on the international side that, he's not going to just stick with the countries and there's going to be, a balance of that. Because I think maybe far too often, having never caddied in one of these, but you see that maybe sometimes captains stubbornly or lazily just say, it's the way it's got to be. Yeah. And there's so many more stats now to lean on. And, Trevor being a guy that's like out there broadcasting, he's been playing a little bit, like he's getting to know these guys. That's part of it too. So you really need to learn your squad. And then in the end, they're going to have that ability in the team room, right, throughout the week, like to buddy up with their countrymen. I love that story about Adam Scott and Hideki.
Good shot. Yeah, just good shot. Yeah, and like the Americans have their pod system. Which has been successful thanks to Paul Azinger. And I feel like we'll see some of that with the internationals. But I think a luxury of being the underdog sort of affords you the ability to do some crazy stuff. I think of the football team, if you're supposed to lose, you can try and fake the field goal once in a while because if it doesn't work out, it's okay,
Right.
Now, when you're in the lead, I'd be careful of that sort of stuff. But initially, I feel like you might see a few of the eye-popping groupings that may just work out great.
Yeah.
I mean, I was watching, now Golf Channel is showing all the old President's Cups, and there was the one there from Lake Manassas at the RTJ golf course. And Tim Clark and Nick O'Hearn, they're both guys that hit the ball nowhere, but played from the fairway both times, and they won a few matches. Yeah. And they were both from the Southern Hemisphere, but their games were similar, right? So they just seemed to connect, and they had a good tournament.
Yeah. That seems like it's particularly helpful in the alternate shot. So, well, then let's just stay on the international just for a second. You've got the list in front of you. If we could build the ideal player, right? Let's talk just if you could pick one guy, you're not going to get to them all. Who would you take to be your driver, driving the ball from the international side?
I think Sung Jae is underrated off the tee. Adam has picked up a whole bunch of power, man. I mean, he's like young Adam. He's a whole lot longer. But I would say with the length of Taylor Pendrith and Cam Davis, and then the accuracy of a Corey Connors, I would say you're building out of the two of those. And then I just got to throw this out there because final round Wyndham Championship Greensboro this year.
Yeah.
CBS, we got the coverage. They send me out there. Dottie's got the final group, and Tom Kim is like 5 under through 6 or something.
Yeah.
So I pick him up on the 7th hole, and this dude basically birdies out and shoots 27. Then he turns and he hits some solid shots. And then on 12, the par 3, they got the flag back on that 2-step green there. It's mishit anything is coming back to you. You can use the backstop, and a lot of players were doing that sort of deal. They were typically hitting 5 irons and stuff. So I get the signal over there. And I remember Nick Feldo, because it was his hole, he comes to me and he goes, "So what's he hitting, 4 iron, Mark?" And I get the signal.
Yeah.
He's going with 3 iron. And I'm going like, well, Nick, this is going to be the caress 3 iron. And at that stage of the game, okay, you're a youngster, the adrenaline is surging through your body, it's testosterone overload, it's go full if you're undecided.
Mm-hmm.
Here's a guy who took the soft 3 iron and hit this thing. It was like raw spaghetti. This ball was so straight. Never left a flag, knocked it in there a few feet, and made 2. And when I saw that, I was like, yikes, this kid's good.
Yeah.
Not just that he shot 27 going out under pressure, but he could vary speed like that under pressure and still and not sacrifice accuracy. And that's when I looked at this. I'm like, geez, he wasn't automatic then. Right. I'm like, if Trevor doesn't pick this kid, I'm going to start crowing. All right. and so when you talk about like that young man is a rival for anybody when he's on.
That's cool. That was an impressive performance. I was on the other side of the golf course with Steven Yeager, who got hot that day as well. So I know exactly what pin you're talking about, and those Korean guys can just get in a groove out there, and so he's going to be a weapon.
Well, look, Stephen, what do you hit, like 4 iron or 5 iron on that hole, right?
No, you know what? I think, but we were earlier in the day. I think we caressed the 3-2, and he just went to the back of the green and he made the putt and actually kickstarted our round. But it was a tweener there. That's such a dirty little pin because you're right. I mean, you can hit in this middle of the green, but then maybe, are you going to 2-putt that? But then if you go long, you're stupid, and now you're putting from the bottom anyways. So, all right, well, we got to get a little U.S. talk as well then. I'm particularly interested in the rookies that haven't played in this before. Max Homa, you got Billy Horschel finally, Cam Young, and Sam Burns. Anything on the rookies that stands out for you that could be really beneficial for the U.S. team or fascinating?
Well, I want to put it I first want to go here and say, you talked about the driving. Watch Christian Besaidenote putt. Because
yes.
I've long believed that match play is essentially a putting contest. And one of the great match players of all time, Bob Jones, learned from Walter Travis. He goes, Travis said to him, "You show me a man who can putt, and I'll show you a match for any man." Right. So looking through those, you got proven winners in Sam Burns, Horschel, all of these sorts of guys. But for the American team, because here Data Golf put out this, strokes gain chart, and it's all America at the top and all the internationals at the bottom. Mm-hmm. Everyone's raging about, well, they're dominant off the tee and all the rest of it. Right. I'm like, this thing's going to come down to guys making putts at the right time. Right. So when I look at that American team, look, Scotty is a fantastic putter. Sam Burns putts surprisingly well. But Billy Horschel, I feel like just the way he is right now and the confidence he's playing with and the way he rolls it, and it used to be an Achilles heel of his, I feel like he's going to be a force, and you're going to see him play a whole lot of matches. And then going further down that list, you mentioned Max Homa.
Yeah.
He's just so reliable from tee through green, and he's easy. I mean, I think the golfers misunderstand Max and that they see the Twitter persona. Mm-hmm. But Max on a golf course, the guy's all business, man. He puts blinkers on, doesn't show too much emotion. So I feel like he'll be a great partner for someone. And he's steady on the greens. But of the crew of rookies I look at, I feel like Horschel, just because of the way he putts, he could be a really good one for them.
Great point on Seabass. Thanks for not forgetting the putting and then mentioning those rookies there too. And Max Homa, obviously a winner at Quail Hollow, so he's going to have good memories there. He's going to be great in the team room. Kevin Kisner is back, which will be great as well.
Don't forget about Kiz at the PGA Championship there in 16, whenever it was. He was the 54-hole leader.
Yep.
Because it's a long golf course, as you know. But from the reports I've gotten, the watchword is you got to play out of the fairways, and the place is the forecast is dry for the next few days. The southeast where I am has been wet, and I'm sure North Carolina has been a little bit too. But still, Kevin Kisner is like a horseshoe. You can't shake the guy. And the way he putts, he's going to be a real tough one. I remember him playing alongside Phil in Liberty National, and they had the stupid little dance they were doing after all these birdie putts they were making. But kids were just draining putts from all over New York over there, and he does that sort of stuff all the time.
That's great. Yeah, they both welcome it.
Yeah.
You mentioned the conditions a little bit. We have to, I mean, they're going to be playing this golf course. Any thoughts on Quail Hollow as a match play golf course?
Well, they've turned the course around a little bit for the folks who watch the Wells Fargo event.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it's not finishing with a green mile. They tee off on one. I can't remember exactly where they turn, but holes 16, 17, 18 are essentially in the middle of the round. So everyone's going to go through there. And I believe, don't quote me on this one, Trevor told me, but I'm 51 years old now. I believe the final hole is going to be what is normally the 9th. So they've got a really cool setup where you play the green mile through the middle of the golf course, through the middle of the round, and then you've got that stretch of holes with 7 the par 5 with the water down the right, 8 the drivable 4 uphill, and 9 just the brutal par 4 around the corner. Where if it gets to that sort of stuff, there's holes where you can see a whole lot of changing, because if it finished in the green mile, you know the drill. Hell, you just somehow make 4 on 16. You somehow hit the ball and it'll land on 17. And then 18, if you make 4, you're likely winning. Now we're going to see a whole lot more birdies and stuff trading hands, maybe even eagles with a par 5, short 4, and then a long 4 finish there with the way the golf course is finishing.
That makes sense. And then also it's forcing the guys to play those other holes in the middle of the round, which there's going to be a lot of trade-off there. And then if your match maybe ended early, then you wouldn't get that stretch, but it's going to create some interesting things there. And then if you go the distance, you've got some fun birdie chances and then a tough as nails ones to finish.
Yeah. Well, that's the cool thing about the way the golf course is set up, because you've got those stretches that are just hard, and then those stretches where you can get it a little bit. And there's 1 or 2 holes, like you got 14 on the back that's ordinarily 14 that's drivable. So now you've got both holes that are sort of early in the round, late in the round, where you can see a whole lot of like birdies and stuff. And then there are going to be times when you just got to hang in there and make a 4 somehow.
I was watching Hideki warm up this morning, Thursday here, Napa week, and he was kind of struggling with his neck. Do you know anything about, that he's played good like that before, right? Is there any protocol or is there any plan if, say, Hideki shows up next week, he's like, I can't go. I'm just curious if you know anything about how that might play out.
I'd be lying if I gave you an answer. When I did talk with him at the Tour Championship a few weeks ago, he seemed fine. And they've planned around this. He's taken time off to make sure he's rested and ready. Mm-hmm. With that being said, I think playing this week in Napa, I'm not sure. Maybe he was just wanting a bit more competition. Right. I'm sure if he's not feeling very well, he may just miss the cut and give himself a few extra days to recover. Yeah. So I was keen to sort of try to understand why he's playing this week. Maybe he wants his commitment. I don't know. But when last I talked with him, he was fine. But I did notice this morning that he was sort of doing a bunch of the neck stretching stuff there.
Yeah. Well, you were calling a lot of golf this year, I guess. Just a few questions and then some fast-hitting stuff before we get you out of here. Who was the most impressive player you saw this year out there covering golf?
Would it be trite if I told you McIlroy? I mean, because, look, I got to see a whole lot of good golf this year. I had the second-to-last group in the PGA Championship, which was Cam Young and Will Zalatoris. Cam Young was actually leading that championship, standing in 16 fairway, 70th hole. Zalatoris gets in the playoff. So I had 2 guys in the thick of it there. I had John Rahm and Torrey Pines who made a run. But I covered Rory on Saturday in Canada. And the way he played the game, to me, looked complete. And I'd been saying this to my announced colleagues the whole year, because everyone's like, Rory can't hit a wedge. And the statistics say his proximity is bad. Yeah. And when I was in the course, and I've covered him a few times, Quail Hollow was another. This was last season, where with a wedge game, he was varying speeds, kind of like Justin Thomas. Trajectories changing, fades, draws, the whole thing. And the numbers weren't bearing out what I was seeing. it was looking like it was going in the right direction. And I kept on telling Nobilo and Baker Finch and them, and I kept on picking on Frank. I'm like, Frank, stop telling them his wedge game is bad. Trust me when I tell you it's getting good.
Mm-hmm.
And all of a sudden that Saturday, stuff started clicking.
Mm-hmm.
And he had shots, and I mean, I get goosebumps now. It was one of those sorts of days. And then the Sunday, he put on just a display. You know, he had Finau and JT in the group with him, and they were all going bananas, and he just outgunned them. Stiffed that wedge on 17 and sort of proved my point. So McIlroy there that week, I remember I had Sam Burns in the final round. He was great. I'm trying to think other ones that stand out to me.
Well, Scheffler, I'm sure you ran into at some point this year.
Yeah, but you know what? I never covered him. Well, actually, I lied. In Phoenix, I had Patrick Cantlay, and then he and Scheffler got into the playoff over there.
Sure, okay.
And that's when I saw him play, and I just saw how, even though he hadn't won up to there, right, he was so up for the moment, and he was, with all that noisy big crowd, he was so dialed, and that's when I sort of knew, okay, this kid is legit, and lo and behold, Player of the Year. I will say that in Dallas, I, for the second year, had KH Lee, and he was playing alongside Justin Thomas, if memory serves. And JT, you would have thought, was like, okay, he's going to win this thing. But KH Lee played beautifully. And so I look for him to, because he's sort of sneaky long and sneaky good. And I look for him in the President's Cup to sort of get up for it too, because his first one, I believe, he held off Jordan Spieth, maybe, or whoever it was. And so when he's won those two Byron Nelson events, he's hung in there against some pretty big time competition. So that was a fun one as well.
Back to back, and fancies himself as a sex symbol.
Yeah, I know, and an opera singer or whatever it is.
You love that. So, but and great point about Rory. I mean, and I think he was so motivated by kind of like putting the PGA Tour on his back. It was super impressive how he closed out. A couple things to get you out of here with. The internationals will win the President's Cup because fill in the blank.
Because of their team spirit.
What's the best shot you've ever hit?
Goodness gracious. I don't know. I've made one ace in my life, but it wasn't that good a shot.
Me too. Mine was terrible. It was thin, and it just rolled in.
You know, I've won tournaments, but nothing ever really stood out. No, I couldn't answer that one.
What's the best shot you've ever seen your brother hit?
Now, I've seen him hit a lot of good shots. I'll tell you one that no one will even know. He was 14. He was over here playing in, or 13 or 14, over here playing in the Rolex Junior. And I was living, it was summer vacation over here, and I stayed with a host family in Montgomery, Alabama. They played at a course called Win Lakes. And I think it was the 13th or 14th hole there, straight away par 4. We sort of head to head, and I'm in All America, right? And he's hanging in there with me. And he hits the 7-iron from the middle of the fairway, and the flag sort of, he always faded the thing. And the flag's left edge of the green, and I'm like, all right, this is going to go at the center of the green. And he starts this thing on the left edge of the green and sort of carves it into the right side of the flag, 15 feet. Mm-hmm. And then he bangs the club in the ground. I'm like, dude, what are you doing? He goes, that wasn't the shot I was seeing. I'm like, so what did you see? He goes, no, I just didn't see it turning that much. And that's when I was like, okay, this guy's legit. So that one was good. And then, I don't know, the 15th hole at the Masters, final round. He's laid up. He's got this downhill lie there. You know, that green looks like it's basically a hog's back. And he's got the lead, and that was the one shot I was scared of coming in. Uh-huh. He hits this flighted wedge in there, hole high, 15, 20 feet. That was fantastic. And then on the 18th hole, he's driven it down the fairway, basically one of the toughest tee shots on the course. And he finds his ball in a divot that's about that deep.
Wow.
And, you know, Neil Wallace, while he had forecaded, he walked up there. And so Trevor's walking up the fairway, and Neil walks back to him a little bit and starts giving him the, hey, bud, this thing's not finished yet, and starts sort of
preparing him for it.
About to see exactly. And Trevor hit this 8-iron out of that divot to the right tier, that back portion of the green there, I don't know, 25 feet or so. And 2-putted for the win.
Wow, what a win! And you answered my other question. I didn't recall who caddied for him, so good shout out there for Neil Wallace. What's the favorite course you've ever played?
Ever played? Well, Augusta National would be silly to say.
Yeah.
But I'll honestly say, and I'll keep it here in Georgia, I love Seaside, down there where they have the RSM Classic. But Peachtree here in Atlanta, Georgia, is just unreal. It is so good. I've gotten to go to a lot of really nice places, but I've never got to play them. Maybe one day when I get old and gray, we'll do that sort of stuff. But Peachtree is special, and Seaside, anyone can go there. I'd recommend that to anybody.
That is a beautiful one. All right, last question. I always ask my guests this. Final round of a major. Let's say it's the Masters. You're playing. I know you've been deflecting your playing career, but you're playing. I've been caddying for you all week. You've got a one-shot lead. Things have been going well, but I broke my leg the night before. I can't go on Sunday. So you got to call in somebody to help get you across the finish line. Who are you going to call to have caddy for you to close out the final round of the Masters?
That's a really good question. Okay, I'm going to hit you with something you won't expect.
Love it.
I'm going with the animal, Gary. And I'll tell you why. Gary is one of those guys that if I had to go into hell to battle Satan, I'd call up Gary Matthews and say, come on, I need someone on my wing. Because he's up for anything. You know, he can get stern and then he can get like, come on, my boy. He's got it all going on. And I'm certain that I'd be nervous as heck, and Gary would be like, I got you. And he'd almost drag you by the scruff of your neck over the finish line. So I'll call up Gary.
I love it. There's a reason he's got that nickname.
Animal. I know, he's earned it. Well earned.
Awesome. Hey, thanks, Mark, for joining me. Give your brother a fist bump for me next week. Have a good broadcast, and good luck with everything this fall.
Thanks, John. I appreciate you. You guys are doing great work, and you caddies are the unsung heroes, and I like what you're doing with your podcast, so keep it up, man.
Thanks. We'll be back soon with another podcast, so please subscribe. And in the meantime, make sure to follow the Caddie Network on all your social media channels. I'm host John Rathouz. Thank you for listening.